There are people who feel like they've lived 1,000 years, even though their birthdays say otherwise. People who carry an ancient exhaustion in their bones. People who aren't old on the outside, but something inside them is already tired. Already done. Already finished with things the world hasn't even begun to offer. People who feel old inside, no matter their age. Not old like wrinkles, or back pain, or forgetting where they left their keys. Not the kind of old that comes with calendars and slow mornings, but a different kind of old. Quieter, heavier, invisible. A soul age. A heaviness that has nothing to do with years lived, and everything to do with the weight carried through them. These are the people who grew up too fast, who learned responsibility before joy. Caution before trust. Silence before expression. The ones who met the sharp edges of life before they even understood the rules. They saw too much, felt too much, understood too much, long before they could articulate any of it. And so they aged, not outwardly, but deep inside, where no one can see, but everyone can feel. They're the people with eyes that look older than their faces, eyes that have the heaviness of someone who has lived 5 lifetimes. Eyes searching for something that doesn't exist anymore, or maybe never did. Eyes that flicker with a quiet sadness only a few ever notice. They sit quietly in crowds, feeling detached from the noise, like observers wandering through a world that moves just a little too fast. They laugh sometimes, but the laughter doesn't quite reach all the way in. And when they smile, it feels like a memory rather than a moment. And every so often, when they think no one is watching, their face collapses into an expression so fragile, so tired, so wounded, you'd swear it belonged to someone centuries older. But they keep going, and they keep holding everything together. And they keep pretending they're fine. Because people who feel old inside are good at pretending. That's one of the first things life taught them. They learned it young, when the world expected strength, before they were ready. When life demanded endurance, before they felt safe. When circumstances forced them to grow, while other kids were still learning simple things. Maybe their childhood ended early, not because of obvious tragedy, but because of responsibility. Maybe they became the caretaker, the listener, the mediator, the emotional adult, in a household full of adults who weren't very adult at all. Maybe they learned that mistakes were dangerous, feelings were inconvenient, and needs were weaknesses. Maybe they were the child who had to comfort the parent, the teenager who had to be the emotional sponge, the young adult who had to pretend they knew what they were doing because no one else would take the lead. Or maybe nothing dramatic happened at all. Maybe they were simply born with a sensitivity too sharp for this world. A heart too porous, a mind too reflective, a soul too open to shadows. Some people are born old. Others grow old inside, as a way to survive. But the feeling is the same. A quiet exhaustion that seeps into the bones, even when the body is still young. They carry invisible fatigue. The kind sleep doesn't fix. The kind vacations don't cure. The kind love can soothe, but never erase. They wake up tired, not physically, but emotionally, mentally, existentially. A tiredness that whispers, "I've seen this before. I've felt this before. I know how this ends." Even their hope feels aged. Their dreams worn out by previous versions of themselves. Their faith in people cautious. Their trust conditional. Their expectations softened by disappointment. They're not pessimists. Pessimists expect the worst. People who feel old inside expect nothing. It's safer that way. They don't complain. They don't announce their pain. They don't ask for anything, because asking feels childish, and they haven't felt childish in decades. They carry themselves with a stillness people admire. Calm, composed, steady, but this calmness came from chaos, this wisdom from wounds, this independence from being left alone too many times. People say, "You're so mature, so strong, so wise for your age," and they offer a polite nod. But internally they whisper, "I had no choice." They didn't grow, they adapted. And adaptation is survival, wearing a respectable mask. They've learned how to endure heartbreak without collapsing, how to swallow disappointment without showing it, how to carry grief quietly like a scar beneath clothing, how to keep moving even when something deep inside them begs to rest. They've seen too many cycles, rising hope, falling hope, people leaving, people changing, life shifting, and they've lived enough inner lifetimes to detect patterns others can't see. They sense endings before beginnings unfold. They feel lies beneath perfect sentences. They detect the smallest crack in a relationship long before it breaks. Old souls have a quiet instinct for endings. They don't confront, don't accuse. They observe, understand, accept, withdraw. They don't cling, don't chase, don't beg for love, not because they're cold, but because they've learned not to rely on uncertainty. They hold people loosely, love gently, appreciate deeply, but never depend fully. Because something in them learned that attachments can be traps, and promises can dissolve like mist, and trust is expensive. When you've been betrayed by subtle wounds no one apologized for. They love differently, cautiously, deeply, observantly, with presence instead of intensity, with depth instead of desperation. Their love is real, but careful. It holds your hand gently, while keeping an eye on the exit, not because they want to leave, but because they've learned that love can vanish without warning. They've lost people without closure, carried heartbreaks that made no sense, outgrown relationships they prayed would last, walked away from people they adored because staying meant abandoning themselves. Loss ages the heart, silence ages the mind. Unsaid goodbyes age the soul. They become old, not in body, but in essence. They often look younger than their age, strangely enough, but their energy feels older, calmer, grounded, almost like they've already accepted truths others haven't even considered. They watch people panic over trivialities, gossip, jealousy, social competition, and feel a quiet detachment, not superiority, but distance. Like someone watching children argue over toys they no longer desire. They've already confronted loneliness, purpose, identity, meaning. They've already had the existential crises others avoid until midlife. They've already learned the impermanence of everything. People think they are emotionally stable, but stability isn't always peace. Sometimes it's resignation, sometimes experience, sometimes the calm that comes from breaking so many times that you know the damage won't kill you. They don't fall apart in public. They crumble inwardly, bleed emotionally beneath the surface, break quietly, and then rebuild themselves silently. They know how to carry sadness without announcing it, process pain without hurting anyone, exist in solitude that feels natural. They have always been emotionally alone, even in crowded rooms, the listener, the supporter, the one who understands but is rarely understood. They don't ask for help, not because they don't need it, but because they've learned not to expect it. They don't want to burden others, disappoint others, expose their vulnerability only to receive shallow comfort. Their emotional world lives inside them, a private archive of memories, lessons, scars. They're not emotionless. They feel too much, which is why they hide it. Sometimes they envy people who can still be naive, trust easily, feel excitement without fear, believe in good things without bracing for the opposite, people untouched by disappointment. They miss a younger version of themselves, the version that still believed, still hoped, still loved, without caution, the version that didn't yet understand the cost of vulnerability. They grieve that lost version quietly, not dramatically, but in soft, lingering mourning. It shows in their long sighs, their 1,000-yard stares, their sudden retreats into thought, their soft-spoken tone. The world misinterprets them. Some think they're cold when they're cautious, distant when they're protecting themselves, indifferent when they're actually overflowing with silent care. They aren't trying to be mysterious. They're trying to feel safe, and safety is rare for them. Sometimes they look in the mirror and wonder why they feel so old, so tired, so out of sync with their age. They wonder if it's normal to feel like they've lived too much, even when they've barely begun. But this inner age is a sign of depth, of sensitivity, of emotional intelligence, of paying attention to life. Their soul refuses superficiality. It's a sign they've lived not long, but deeply. The universe gives old souls to certain people because they are meant to feel life consciously, meaningfully. But it's not easy. They long for emotional rest, a place to set down their heaviness, a relationship where they don't have to be the strong one, a moment where they can feel young again. They crave softness, gentleness, someone who sees past their composure, someone who understands that strength and fragility coexist, someone who knows the difference between being stable and simply not breaking in public. They want a place where they can say, "I'm tired," without guilt, but most of the time, they keep it inside. That's the version they learned to survive with. And so they move through life quietly, gracefully, thoughtfully, not bitter, Not hopeless, not defeated, just aged inside. Ancient in ways others won't understand. They carry a beauty born of depth, softness forged from pain, wisdom carved from wounds, calmness born from inner storms, strength that doesn't need an audience. They feel deeply even when silent, care intensely even when distant, love profoundly even when private, hope quietly even when doubtful. And deep beneath the exhaustion, the wisdom, the scars, there is still a young version of themselves waiting to breathe, waiting to be understood, waiting to be held, waiting to feel light again. Because no matter how old they feel on the inside, a part of them still wants to be young, still wants to rest, still wants to feel safe enough to exist without carrying the weight of the world. And maybe one day, they will.